What's going on, everybody? So far today we're seeing a nice green day for the Bitcoin miners, for Bitcoin, for most of crypto. I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about the other day we saw a record outflow for Gbtc, and in a couple of months we're on track to see that dry up. We're also going to talk about the Bitcoin halving, and it's likely to come in sooner than expected with this huge wave of global hash rate increase. And we'll also take a look at BTBT and Cleanspark. BTBT just released earnings. I'll put my video covering that at the end screen, but BTBT is among the best performers today. So let's get started. First off, we're going to look over some Bitcoin stuff. If you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out the links down below for some free stocks and cryptos, and let's get started. And first off, I want to talk about Bitcoin's halving coming in sooner than you expect again. And we saw this last cycle, but this recent surge in computing power on the Bitcoin blockchain has sped up the creation of new blocks as mining companies seek to cash in on the bullish trend in the Bitcoin market. And these miners are bringing new, more powerful rigs online, as well as even plugging in older machines again, which pushes up the global network hash rate. And remember, not long ago, the halving was expected to be right around the end of April. Now it's expected to be around the middle of April. And we know that as hash rate grows, everyone's piece of the pie becomes smaller, difficulty levels increase to kind of compensate for that. There's still occasional difficulty adjustments to maintain the cadence, but over periods of time, and especially in bull markets, the blockchain can speed up. And the chief growth officer of Marathon said global hash rate was going to grow because lots of people ordered lots of machines. That's the number one factor. Not as significant, but still evident, is also people are replugging in some old machines due to the prices being so high. And according to NiceHash, halving is set to be on April 16th. This may come in a few days early as everyone races to get more machines online. But we are roughly 26 days or under from the Bitcoin halving. And I will remind you guys yet again that now is still the time to be a buyer. I hear a lot of people saying, I'm just gonna wait for 50,000 Bitcoin. That's great, but I think that isn't the way to go right now. Now, it's a great idea to have some extra cash on the side if we do see a dramatic pullback like that. If we see a major retracement down to 50,000 or potentially lower, it's a great idea to keep cash on the side. But you know, to me, Bitcoin is a dip buy opportunity along with the Bitcoin miners for at least over the next couple of months. We are still nowhere near the potential peak. Look at how the RSI on the monthly typically acts. We get to the peak. Every cycle we see a much more overbought RSI on the monthly. Now, I will admit we got pretty close on the weekly on a smaller time frame. However, because of this recent pullback, we are now no longer as overbought on the weekly, but still there. And on the daily, we have more than sufficiently cooled down. So maybe we see a little more retracement, get that weekly to a more neutral level. However, when you look at the monthly, we still have a lot of juice left. We aren't even at the halving yet. We are nowhere near the peak here. It is a dip buy opportunity. Now, I was watching this trend line for Bitcoin and I was calling for 62K to test this trend, but we fell a little faster than I expected. So we tested the trend a little farther down on this yellow line. If we kind of floundered around, if we didn't see this hard of a sell-off, we would have likely hit that 62. However, we did come down to 60,900 before bouncing essentially. So I do think moving forwards, this is still an important trend line to keep an eye on. We did bounce off of it, and we will see how we do on it over the next couple of weeks. We are going to have to see a bounce soon and a push above it. Otherwise, we could potentially break it and the market might react to this. But where we are in the halving, I just don't see us breaking this and heading down to the 50,000s. I think that's very unlikely, but always expect the unexpected. You know, I'm not saying it's not a good idea to keep cash on the side. I'm just saying if you really want Bitcoin, if you really believe the price is going to be higher by the end of the year, why aren't you buying now? We are still roughly 15% from our recent peak. I do see this as a dip buy opportunity, and I could say that until I'm blue in the face. Now, I also want to talk about the other day we saw a record amount of outflow from Gbtc. However, this should be drying up soon, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the other day we did see net negative flows as Gbtc sheds $642 million in a single day. Now, this explains what happened on March 18th. We saw a huge amount of outflow from Gbtc and overall net outflow on that day. And you'll see that Gbtc so far has sold $12 billion worth of their holdings, whereas IBIT has added about the same amount. So those two basically knock themselves out, and then the rest of the Bitcoin spot ETFs is overall net inflow. If we didn't have all this selling from Gbtc, Bitcoin would be much higher in price. And in my eyes, you gotta take this as a buying opportunity. As we see this weakness with Gbtc, as we see this selling pressure pushing against all this buying pressure, it's like a tug of war. take advantage of it. Soon we won't see all this selling pressure from GBTC. Now, there is an expectation or a theory that Grayscale could run out of Bitcoin supply by July. And we looked at March 18th, while March 19th was another pretty rough day. We saw overall outflows there as well. To me, on these days that you see overall outflows with the Bitcoin spot ETFs bringing a little fear into the market, these are the chances to buy. We're getting a discount on Bitcoin. It just seems there's so much more interest when Bitcoin is pushing new all-time highs. Everyone wants a piece of it when it's running and everyone's just so excited and wondering about when to get in. But when it's pulling back, you don't hear as many questions about should I buy. You hear more people saying they're gonna wait. I just think that's funny that people aren't really of the waiting mindset when we're seeing new all-time highs. People are saying, should I get in now? However, when we see a little retracement like we are here, there aren't as many questions of should I buy Bitcoin now? Has it dipped enough? It's just typical market psychology. Emotions getting the best of people all the time. But basically the point of this article was if the rate of selling continues with GBTC, in just about 4 months or by the end of July, Grayscale will run out of their assets. Now, this doesn't mean wait until July because it's clear skies ahead. You want to buy while things look slightly negative. These overall outflow days, to me, I see them as great opportunities. And I just can't believe, if someone really thinks this is the peak already, I mean, I don't know. It's sad. All you have to do is follow the 4-year cycle, and to me, it's very, very obvious that we are nowhere near the peak. This is just the beginning, really. And maybe the peak comes in early this cycle, as we saw new all-time highs before the halving this time around. I do think it's pretty likely we'll see the peak come in a little earlier as well. And as we get through each halving, we kind of see a front running. People get in earlier and they leave earlier as well. Things could play out differently this time around, of course, with the new spot ETF buying pressure. However, my plan is still to at the very least trim by the end of 2024 and throughout 2025. I do think looking back, it won't be a bad idea to trim starting about 6 months or so from now. But at the very least, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners, they're all great buying opportunities for the next 3 to 6 months or so, before it's probably time to start flipping to either only holding or starting to sell. But let me know what your guys' plan is for the halving cycle. How are you going to play this? Do you have price targets that you're selling at, or do you have a timeline that you're selling at? For me, it's a timeline. Now, I do want to talk about CleanSpark. I am still watching for this descending resistance. I think we're still at a very important point. Either we're going to come up, find this as resistance, and retest our 15 area support, which has been playing out as a very strong support so far. But keep an eye on this descending resistance. If we see a breakout, I do think we are heading higher. And this circle right here, this is just where my covered calls is. We basically have to head to $25 by the end of March. But as we get to rallying in the future, I do think selling covered calls into these rallies isn't a horrible idea. I do think it's a good idea to sacrifice some premium for a further out strike price, because this is such a volatile stock. We can see huge swings upwards and downwards, and you really don't want the position to go against you. In my opinion, it's definitely too early to sell CleanSpark still, but if we do see these huge overbought pops, I will take profit here and there on it with the use of selling covered calls. To me, CleanSpark's still looking good, and to me, it's still time to buy CleanSpark, and I can see CleanSpark being a buy for at least the next 3 months or so at the very minimum. Alright, now I want to talk about BTBT. They did just give their earnings, and it did go out pretty well. But if you want some context on that, check out my previous video. I'll leave it at the end screen. It's funny because yesterday, a lot of these Bitcoin miners were absolutely selling off. BTBT didn't do too bad. It showed a little bit of strength compared to the others, and today it's one of the best movers. It's no surprise because of their pretty good earnings. I do believe that's giving them some extra juice to keep going. But looking at BTBT on the chart, we are facing this descending channel here. Looks like we're starting to break out of it, so keep an eye on that. If we can see another good green day, I would say that confirms a breakout. I want to see a candle close above this pattern. I think BTBT is a great buy right here. They confirm they're going to continue to stake their Ethereum. We should continue to see that snowball and get larger and larger over time. They are expecting to grow their AI service by the end of 2024. They're expecting $100 million annualized on their AI alone, and that gives them better margins than Bitcoin mining, they said. And also in terms of Bitcoin mining, they're expecting to work their way towards 6 exahash. And I know compared to some others, this is a pretty small number. But keep in mind, we're talking about a company that's about $250 million market cap. Other miners that are over the 10 exahash range are into the billions already. So I do think BTBT is criminally undervalued when looking at hash rate. When looking at what else they're doing, their AI is going to grow pretty substantially over the next couple quarters. They're going to continue to stake ETH. I expect ETH to run up in price, which will give them more value for their ETH. And they're going to continue to stake it and basically get income for doing nothing. But I'm very bullish on Bitcoin miners as a whole. I do think they're going to do very well. I do think we just have to get through the halving. We could see some upcoming negative days, being that rewards are going to be cut in half, but I do expect them to rally shortly after the actual halving. Once we get past the negative that the market sees with these Bitcoin miners taking half the rewards, the reality though is Bitcoin's price appreciation will more than make up for it. And think about this, Bitcoin's in the 60,000 area. Let's say the halving already happened and these miners are taking half the rewards at 60,000. Well, that's the equivalent of Bitcoin being at 30,000. These miners were doing perfectly fine when Bitcoin was in the 30,000s. I mean, these miners, many of them survived while Bitcoin was briefly at 15,000. So to think the miners won't make it when Bitcoin's up in the 60s post-halving and gets higher and higher throughout the rest of this year, I think that's ridiculous to think that these miners aren't going to do well. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think these miners are going to continue to see a little bit of pain? Or do you think this is the end of the fear with the Bitcoin having rewards being cut and we just rally from here? I personally do think we're going to see a little bit of a rough next couple of days for the Bitcoin miners, but I could be wrong and we could just be rallying from here. Many of these miners are down 50% from their peaks. I would say the halving is pretty much priced in, but that doesn't mean we don't see a little bit more worry from here. My opinion is this will be one of our last buying opportunities for the Bitcoin miners, so get ready. But thanks again for watching, guys. Let me know what you're buying right now, and I'll see you next time.